So we have a defender tier list. First of all, let's go over Alibi. I think Alibi is good. Not like great, not like an every round pick that you should put, not really situational either, because you could play her whenever you want. I don't think she's bad either. I don't think she needs to be reworked, but I don't think she's OP. So I'm going to stick her in good for now. Somebody who I do think is pretty OP though. Oh, are there any defenders that are OP, chat? I don't think there are. Somebody who I do think is pretty good though would be Capcan. I think Capcan is a great solo queue ranked operator. You can kind of play him whenever you want. Capcan, you can kind of just put traps literally wherever you want. It does not matter, and you will somehow get a kill most of the time with it. Especially if you're on console, most people will not be able to like shoot them for whatever reason. I don't know why. The same thing can be said about Legion. I think Legion is a great informational trap operator and a great way to counter shields as well. Somebody who is a bit worse though than all of the operators I've mentioned so far is Cav. Cav is pretty bad. I think if you buffed Cav's guns, she could be good, but the fact of the matter is she has a pretty subpar ability and subpar guns, so unless you buff one of them, she will remain in the bad category for any future tier list that I make. Now, I do want to clarify one thing. Just because an operator is in rework does not mean I think that they're necessarily bad. I think they just need to be reworked because their gadget doesn't fundamentally make that much sense in the game. And that is going to be Tachanka. I think Tachanka is actually pretty useful. If you've ever been a shield operator going against a Tachanka, you know what I'm talking about. He does have his niche uses, especially if you're good at, like, you know, the trajectory of his canisters. He can be pretty good. But I do think that the fact of the matter is, his gadget is just clunky, and I don't like the way that it operates. I also don't like how many he has and how much time he's able to delay that way and how small his fire is. It just makes for an uncomfortable game loop that a lot of people just don't like. He is situational, like you said in the chat right there, but even when he is situational, I still think he needs to be reworked. He's just not fundamentally that sound of an operator, in my opinion. Next up is Warden. I think Warden you could put in great. With everyone running shields, naturally, it makes it kind of a plant meta, right? Which means everyone is also running Ying. So I think if you bring Warden every single round, no one's really going to judge you. Also, if you're on console, chances are you think that you're stomping, so you run Warden every round anyways, which is why most people wanted to see him in the great category, and it is why I'm putting him in the great category. Somebody else who I definitely think belongs in the great category after some balancing changes that slipped under the cracks for most people is Ella. I think Ella also belongs in great. The fact that you can have a deployable shield, great weapons, a pistol if you want to go for montages, and you have the ability to counter shields with one of the most annoying abilities to go against in the entire game, and or you could bring impacts to counter those shields even more. I think Ella is in the best state that Ella has been in a while. If you want to make a case for putting her in good, I'd understand, but I do think she is a little bit better of a pick than somebody like Alibi, or the next person that I'll also be putting in the same exact category, which is Mozzie. I don't think Mozzie really is that good. I might even throw him lower in the tier list. I don't think he's as bad as like Cav though, to be completely honest, but he's just in the worst state that he's ever been in, right? The only thing he really has going for him is his nitro cell. His ability is pretty subpar. If you want to do what he does, you could just do it on mute and do it better. If you wanted the 3 cameras, you could just bring Valkyrie. If you wanted the moving cameras, you could just bring Echo. Mozzie does what everybody does in one operator, but just in a worse way. He also doesn't have any notable scopes on his guns. It's all 1Xs, which really sucks, especially on the Roni. So Mozzie and good just kind of makes sense to me. Now, there's one category we haven't talked about yet, and that is situational. I think Castle is a situational operator. You can't really play him on every site and get value out of him, but when you do, and you're a good Castle player, you get a lot of value out of Castle, especially on maps like Border, where you could play him almost every single site, or on maps like Coastline, where some of the sites, he's pretty viable. But then there's some maps where it doesn't make any sense to bring him at all, some sites even as well. So that's why I'd throw him in situational. Somebody else who I think is pretty situational would actually be Mira. The reason I think Mira is pretty situational is because there's so many counters to Mira now that you have to only play Mira in a situation where it's hard for her to counter. For example, if you go to the basement of Oregon, right, you can't play vert on that entire site, and one of Mira's biggest counters is somebody bucking above or below you, and if you can't do that to Mira, that makes it a lot easier to play Mira. And if you're in higher lobbies or you just have competent teammates, playing Mira usually means that you have a teammate who is running Wamai to make sure that nobody plays Ashe or Callie against your windows. So in situations like that, she can be good. But if they can play vert on you, if you don't have competent teammates, or if it's just a site that doesn't really support it, like Hookah on Coastline, then Mira is just not all that good. So she's pretty site and team dependent and strat dependent as well. Next up is Smoke. I think Smoke, I'm gonna put Smoke in the good category. Normally I would put Smoke in great, and if you were around for Siege 4 years ago, you would have put Smoke in OP. But man, how this operator has fallen on the tier list. Holy shit. The fact of the matter is, Smoke just isn't all that good compared to other defending options, like a Warden, like a Legion, like a Kapkan, like an Ella, or the many other defenders that I'm going to be going over. Since the release of Azami and Fenrir when they were both broken, and Solus, Cade, Turbo combos, Smoke just kind of fell off. And if you look at the win rates for console, Smoke actually has the worst win rate out of any defender, and that's even below Clash. So it goes to show that Smoke as a concept of an operator is pretty good, but just not really all there in terms of execution, because it just takes too much effort to learn how to play the operator correctly to be able to get such little value out of that operator, right? Also, I will say one thing, they buffed the FMG9 recoil, so anybody who runs FMG9 on Smoke will have a better time than they normally would, but still really not enough to bring Smoke up in a tier on this tier list. Next, we're going to go over a defender that recently got changed, which is Solus. I think Solus is, where am I going to put Solus? I think at the very highest, she goes in good. At the very highest. If you wanted to, you could make a case for bad, but I think the fact that she can deny drones is pretty nice, so I'll stick her in good. I think also what most people don't know is when Solus got nerfed initially this season, the one thing I will say about Solus is ever since they got changed, one thing most people didn't realize is when you use that overclock ability, it actually completely refills that meter whenever you use the overclock ability, so you can use her ability for a lot longer. They also buffed her in other minute ways whenever they nerfed her initially, so she's not like in the dirt terrible, but I do still think she needs her impacts and her range back. Somebody else who I think is a bit overhated in my opinion would be Aruni. Aruni isn't like god tier that most people would put her. I see a lot of content creators putting Aruni in OP or in great. Aruni is not all that. Aruni is okay. I don't want to put her in bad, but I also don't want to say that she's as bad as people like Alibi, Solus, Smoke, or Mozzie. Yeah, I do. I think Aruni's cool on PC when you can use that DMR, and if you're good with Aruni on console, she's pretty cool. But most of the time, all a team has to do is bring one set of flash grenades, and then your Aruni gates are completely useless. Sure, it's cool being able to use her fists to make rotates, but most of the time your teammates are going to bring a shotgun or impacts, so it does not matter half the time. I think this is arguably going to be one of the most overhyped operators in Rainbow Six Siege right now, because she really, like, in idea, she does a lot, but in practice, she doesn't do a lot, if that makes sense. Anyways, let's talk about the other catchers now that we're here. First of all, being Jaeger. I think Jaeger is pretty great. You can bring him everywhere. Now that Wamai doesn't have an ACOG, I think a lot more people are going to be defaulting to Jaeger in most of their games. But the fact of the matter is that Jaeger can't catch as much as Wamai, so Wamai does have his uses as well, which is why I also want to put Wamai in great. You can use both of these operators pretty much every single site, and you're going to get value out of these operators every single time you bring them, right? So I just want to clarify, anybody in the great category is an operator that you're going to bring that you know is going to get value at some point, guaranteed. All of these operators are like that. The good operators are kind of like that, and the bad operators are like, it's a 50-50 shot, right? Now, there is one category in this tier list that I have not gone over yet, and that is the OP section. And I really think out of all of the defenders here, there is only one that I can honestly think of that is broken. And when I say broken, I mean like they need a nerf because of how good they are. And that is, y'all are gonna hate me for this, that's Valkyrie. I think, bro, because before Azami, before Fenrir, and before Solus came out, like the three broken operators, before they came out, every single person was putting Valkyrie in OP in all of their tier list. I was doing it too, because I was a content creator back then, right? I was doing it. So they haven't changed her since those three operators have been in the game. They made it to where you can't have outside cameras, but you still can. They last 10 seconds, and if you're using outside cameras, you're only using it to spawn peeking around anyways, and the 10 seconds is enough time to do that. So she's just the same as she always was back when she was an overpowered operator, correct? So if she's the exact same operator back when she was overpowered, she would still be overpowered now, right? Especially now that Azami, Fenrir, and Solus, the 3 strongest defenders, have been nerfed below her. Listen, I think Valkyrie's overpowered. Every single time I go against a Valkyrie, it is the most annoying fucking thing on the planet. And I ban Valkyrie so often, and I'm sure you ban Valkyrie so often because she's so annoying. So why would you not put her in OP? Why? Every single other operator that we ban instantly in most maps gets thrown in OP. Why not this one? Exactly. You can't answer it. Most people don't put Valkyrie in OP because they're so used to stronger defenders being in the game that they don't even think about it. But now that those operators aren't as strong, Valkyrie's in OP. Deal with it. Now, I do want to give an honorable mention to one other operator that could go in the OP category, and that is Azami. Even with the amount of Azami nerfs that have come through, I still think Azami, as a concept of an operator, is really, really broken. There are some crazy, like, pixel angles you can create with Azami, like rafters on Clubhouse or Nighthaven Labs or the map desk in Villa, right? That you can just get these crazy angles that nobody can pre-fire literally at all. And then you have impacts, you have a great gun, you have a deagle for sight setup. I mean, Azami I still think is pretty broken even though they've nerfed her. And most of the time, if you're shooting in the zombie barricade, you're gonna get swung, so you can't really destroy them as much as you'd want to, in my opinion. So I think Azami does deserve to be broken alongside Valkyrie, but I'm not looking at literally anybody else that would be broken on this list, so I think that's it for the broken category. Let's move on down to some worse operators, in my opinion, which would be Clash. I have a pretty biased opinion towards Clash. I myself am a pretty good Siege player. I myself am a pretty good shield player. I consider myself to be a good shield player because I play them all the time. I've watched guides on it. I have players and friends like Glenny who have like 10,000 hours on Blitz that are really good, and they've taught me everything they've known. So to Clash's fullest potential, I think at best Clash is situational. You can play Clash, especially if they're cheating or if they're running shields, and get a lot of value as Clash. You have the Mini F2 as your secondary as well, which is a really, really good SMG. You could have impacts for rotates or for countering shields even more. So Clash situationally is pretty good. The reason I say situational is because there are some sites and maps where it's pretty hard to play Clash and not have someone give you back shots from a window outside, right? Like Basement of Oregon, Clash is easy. There's no windows that lead to basement. All they can do is get to site to flank you, right? But on a map like Consulate, where there's 30 angles upstairs looking at you at all times, Clash is going to be a lot harder to play, right? So I think she's pretty site-dependent, map-dependent as well, just as these operators in the other situational category are too. Next up is Pulse. Now, I will say I honestly think, even though Solus is pretty bad, Pulse does everything that Solus does, but worse, in my opinion. Pulse has a worse gun, and it doesn't even have the ACOG like Castle's gun does. You do have a Nitro, but a lot of the times, if you have sound, if you have a good working headset, you don't need a Pulse scanner to get that Nitro kill, right? So I don't know. Pulse doesn't really seem all that good. And if you want to be able to deny plants, Solus can also do that. Echo can do that, and Echo's way better in this meta right now. So honestly, y'all might get mad at me for this, but I want to put Pulse in bad. I think Pulse gets outshined by most operators right now than a lot of people realize, in my opinion. Put Clash in good, you leprechaun. Yeah, ban that guy. That's insane. But the person going Clash needs to use their mic. Not even, bro. Not even. You can literally sit and hold Bakery of Cafe with Clash, not use your mic the entire time, and they can't push you. Not at all. It helps if you use your mic, but you don't need to. You don't need to at all. Somebody else that I want to put in somebody else who I think y'all are going to have a bit of a weird disagreement with me on is the Wavmile operators, like Bandit, Cade, and Turborau. These 3 operators are situational. I'm sorry. I know that you might think that they're good, but you do not need a Bandit for every site, because there are some sites where Cade would be better than Bandit. You don't need a Cade every site, because there are some times that a Bandit is better than a Cade. It's also band dependent. Is Thatcher on the board? No. Bring Cade. Is he on the board? Yes. Bring Bandit. Turborau, you only are going to use if you already have a Cade or a Bandit on the board and you want to support them because there's a secondary wall that leads to site that you want to stall on time for, right? Or maybe you're trying to counter shields or you just want the DMR. They're all situational. As much as they're good operators, they're good. Just like Castle, just like Mira, these are all good operators. They are situational. None of these operators here, I'm not saying any of these operators are below the operators above them. I am not saying that Mira is worse than Warden or Mira is worse than Kapkan. That's not what I'm saying. Think of this tier as like its own off to the side second tier list, right? You can't really quantify putting these above or below any other tier list because they're situational. They are really, really good, but only in certain situations, right? That's how the situational category works. Next, let's look at an operator that I think most people don't realize is really good right now, which is Echo. I think Echo is fire. There's shields everywhere. You have an ACOG, you have the extra armor, you have impacts for shields too. I think if you have somebody like Legion or Kapkan banned and you want another good alternative, maybe they already took Ella, maybe they already took Clash, and you want to be able to counter shields, Echo's a great way to do it. Also, I think Echo is the hardest operator in the game to play and play effectively. Like, he has a really high skill floor, but if you can get there, Echo is pretty nice. Worst comes to worst, it's just good movable cameras, and with the drone boost being added to Siege, you have fast Echo cameras too. I think Echo is just a great operator right now, in my opinion. Next up is Doc. I think Doc, honestly Doc is dependent on what platform you're playing him in. If you're on PC, Doc is good. If you're on console, Doc is great, right? Because healing matters more on console due to the fact that HP is lost more on console because people don't hit heads as often, they hit the body. If you hit the head, healing doesn't matter because you're fucking dead, which is why Doc and any other healing operator kind of sucks on PC because PC people hit heads more often, right? Which is why he's pretty undervalued. I will say the fact that you have a Bailiff and you have Barbed Wire, which does damage now, is pretty good. So even on PC, I feel like Doc is still pretty nice. The gun is great, the ACOG is great, and I do find myself healing every now and then on PC. So I think Doc deserves great. What do y'all think? Doc Rook OP on console, trash on PC. I wouldn't say OP, maybe in lower lobbies. But I do think Doc deserves great alongside Rook. You might be saying, well, Rook's not great because he just has armor plates and not that useful. On PC and on console, Rook for the past, I want to say 2 years straight, has had at least the top 3 position in terms of win rate for both console and PC. Top 3. That's not for attackers and defenders. That's for all operators. For the past few seasons, I'm pretty sure he's been at number 1. Like, Rook has actually been winning a lot more than people realize. And that's not just because bad players are playing Rook. That statistic is for Emerald and Plat players and above. Like, good players. Right? So I think Rook is actually pretty good. But Thunderbird, on the other hand, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and stick her down there. If you played the game, you don't need to know why. She's just pretty ass. Worst version of Doc. Anyways, next up, let's go over Vigil. Ooh, okay. So I had a theory that when Deimos came out, Vigil would actually be really good, because at the same time Deimos came out, they took away 1.5s, which made it to where roamers with the 1.5 were no longer as valuable, which made Vigil more valuable, right? But also, when Deimos came out, Vigil could counter Deimos. And then they also made it when Deimos came out that Vigil could counter Lion and he could counter Grim. So I said, I think in the next few seasons, people will start to value Vigil more. And they did. And I think now, Vigil is a great operator. You could play Vigil every single round and get value out of Vigil. Now that Solus can't deny drones in the prep phase either, Vigil becomes increasingly more valuable. Now that there's a shield meta and you have impact grenades, Vigil becomes increasingly more valuable. Now that people on console and on PC are starting to realize the potential of the boss G, Vigil becomes more valuable. Now that people are practicing Dokkaebi on console with the SMG-12 because they all want to be stomping, Vigil becomes more valuable. So I really do think that Vigil is a valuable operator and is one of the most underrated roamers in all of Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege in arguably history. Next up is Fenrir. I don't think Fenrir is broken. I honestly don't even think Fenrir is great. With the Fenrir nerf, there have been less times that Fenrir has been brought and I've actually been scared of a Fenrir and a Fenrir have killed me than there have times where the Fenrir has been useless. So a lot of people are going to be mad at me for me putting Fenrir like below the operators over here. Honestly, Fenrir kind of fucking blows right now. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I like the fact that you don't have to worry about your hacks being deleted anymore. But I play this game on a competitive level. The last time Fenrir was played, it was on top floor consulate, and we got a team ace. I even got blinded and it didn't matter because you can still see in front of you a good 5 feet, right? So he might be like situationally good. He's pretty sight dependent actually. He is pretty sight dependent. If you're on bigger maps where the range of effect of the blindness actually is pretty crucial, and you can hide your Fender mines more, like maps like Bank, for example, then Fender can actually be pretty good. So actually, I'll put Fender in situational. I've changed my mind. I don't think Fender deserves to be in this category with these people, but I don't think he's quite as good as he used to be, honestly. I think he's situational. Next up is Frost. If there was a tier between good and great, that's where I would put Frost. Unfortunately, there isn't. So I think what I'm gonna have to do is either piss off the people that think that Frost is good or piss off the people that think Frost is bad. The ability isn't all that good and it never really was, right? The reason you bring Frost is because it gives you an ACOG and a low recoil SMG that you can easily hit heads with if you have good aim, and she brings a deployable shield, and she has a shotgun for sight setup, right? 3 reasons why Frost is good. And nobody in this category is able to do that, but there are people in this category that are able to do that. So I think it would only be fair for me to put Frost in the great category, if that makes sense. Right, because Echo can do that. Echo brings a low recoil SMG with an ACOG with a deployable shield. Or impacts for sight setup. Ella does that without an ACOG, of course. Warden can do that. Next up is Goyo. Honestly, I think Goyo is pretty great as well. I don't want to put like half the operators in great, but I feel like I have to. I feel like if an operator is in the great category, that means the operator is like perfectly balanced. Because in a perfect world, every single operator would be in the great category, right? You can play the operator every single round and it'd be useful. It's not too OP to where they need to be nerfed or the concept is just too strong, but it's not too bad to where you can only play it situationally, or even if you play them, they're dog shit, or even if you play them, they're really dog shit, or even if you play them, they're so dog shit they need to be reworked. So, I think a lot of operators are just going to have to go in great, and Goyo is one of those operators. ACOG on a Vector, or a TCSG that also brings sight setup. 4 canisters that can deny 20 seconds of entry denial each, adding up to a total of 80 seconds of entry denial for 1 entry point is crazy. Impacts for shields, right? Just a really, really good operator. The pistol's really nice to use as well. So I think Goyo definitely deserves being great. I also think Maestro deserves to be in the same exact place. Same thing as Echo, where the ability is really good right now, impacts are really good right now, the gun is really good right now, you have a bailiff for sight setup as well, and now you have a 3rd camera. So, dude, Maestro is pretty good. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me on that. People might disagree with me on my mute placement. I don't think mute's OP. I think if you're putting mute in OP, you just figured out that mute was a good operator and you're playing him for the first week of you playing him. He's a good operator. Do not get me wrong. None of these operators are ordered, by the way. I'm not saying like Echo's better than Doc or Doc's better than Rook. I'm just throwing them in their respective tiers. But Mute is definitely like high grade, for sure, if I had to place him in a specific order. He's a good operator. I don't think Mute needs to be nerfed, though. I think if Mute got nerfed, Mute would be dog shit. So I'll put Mute in great. You have a Nitro Cell, you have SMG-11 and a shotgun for sight setup. The gadget is as versatile as it gets. It counters Dokkaebi, it counters Grim, it counters Lion, it counters Wall Denial, it counters drones, it counters drone-specific abilities. It's just really good. I don't think he's broken, but I think he's a damn good operator. Very, very solid. Nitro as well, exactly, right? He is amazing. Very solid operator once you get the recoil of that SMG-11 down, for sure. Another solid operator to me would be Melusi. With the secondary shotgun, love Melusi. Don't like that she doesn't have an ACOG and that she has a 4th Banshee. I think that's a little broken, but I still think Melusi's pretty great. You can play Melusi every round and get a lot of value off of her, especially in console when it's harder to shoot her traps, right? Next up, let's go over Thorn. Thorn's pretty bad. I mean, have you played Thorn? Do I gotta say much? You can make an argument for good. I wouldn't. She's pretty dog ass. Which sucks, because look at me, right? Funny. But next up is Sentry. Sentry, I think, is at best situational. but I think more realistically, you'd put Sentry in good. Like, yeah, bringing a Nitro Cell and a deployable shield together is pretty nice. Proc Alarm Nitro Cell is pretty nice too. Impacts and Barbed Wire for shield counter is pretty good. Impacts and Nitro for shield counter. Barbed Wire and Proximities for info is pretty nice. But, I mean, you could just bring a Jaeger. You could just bring a Goyo, you could just bring a Melusi, you could just bring a Legion, you could just bring a Kapkan, a Mute, a Warden, a Zombie, a Valkyrie, an Ella, a Wamai, an Echo, a Doc, a Rook, a Vigil, a Frost, a Fenrir, a Maestro, a Castle. You could bring so many better things. So, not that Sentry is bad, there are just unfortunately better options for most players. Pretty mid in my opinion. If you wanted to put Sentry in bad, honestly, I could not blame you. Sentry is pretty ass. Actually, I think I'm going to do that. I don't think Sentry is as good as any of these operators. I don't think Sentry is, so I'm putting Sentry in bad. Next up is Oryx. Oryx is also bad. Arguably, you could rework Oryx. Like, yeah, you can counter shields as Oryx, but if the Monty player is half as good as, like, the average Monty player, the Monty player can so easily dodge Oryx. I'm a Monty main, I know. There has not been a single time that I've saw an Oryx and been scared. I'm more scared of Tachanka players when I play Monty than I am of Oryx players. Because all you gotta do when you see the Oryx, unextend, turn your body, he runs past you, you ADS him and shoot him. It's so fucking easy. So even then he doesn't have a role. There's no reason to use him for sight setup because you're gonna lose HP unless you're running with a Doc or a Thunderbird, right? The Bailiff for sight setup is cool, the T5 is cool, but even then, literally just run Legion. He has a super shorty and a T5 as well with a much better ability that also can counter shields. So Oryx doesn't have a place, and I think they need to rework him. I've suggested a rework with Oryx, where what they do is they make it to where any HP that is lost when you dash through walls slowly is regained over time. He can regenerate his health, essentially. I think that's pretty cool. They could even make it to where any HP lost in general slowly regenerates, and he'd be a really, really good solo queue operator. Completely unrealistic. He's got a healing factor, but I mean, it is what it is. Now, finally, what all of you have been waiting for is the new Defender Skopos. What do I think about this operator? I think this operator is gonna seem pretty bad to most people at first. But I think once the majority of the population knows how to play him based off of either experience or watching Pro League players use the operator to full its potential, I think the operator is actually going to go in the great category. Sort of like towards the bottom of the great category, not necessarily situational or in good. Maybe honestly situational. We'll see how it shakes out. I'll make an updated tier list at some point later on. But I don't think that the operator's honestly that bad. I think it's pretty good. I think the fact that you can roam and when shit gets sticky, you fucking teleport out is crazy. The gun is crazy good. The fact that you have 2 entire magazines because each shell both have different ammo counts and health counts too. You get 2 health bars. I think that's crazy good. It's essentially like bringing a bulletproof camera and a deployable shield as well on defense that you can use. You also have impacts. The gun is really, really, really nice to use. The fact that you can also use the teleport mechanic to essentially hold 2 different areas of the map at one time, like you would be able to zone people on, like with an operator like Smoke. I think that Skopos is not a bad operator, to be completely honest. Again, gonna seem bad at first, so if you think that they deserve to be lower, I understand. But I think later, once people will realize how to actually play this operator, especially in tandem with operators like Mute, Jaeger, Mozzie, Castle, things of that nature, I think this operator is going to be really, really, really good. But with that out of the way, my name is Alka. Check out this next video, and I hope we'll see you there. Later.